All right, welcome. We've got Reggae, Estonian composer Arvo Pert, music of the Holocaust, and even the Psalms of David. A real smorgasbord for you today because we're talking about Beatitude 8. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. So I think what Jesus might be getting at here a little bit is that if you're being persecuted or oppressed, and especially if it's because you're doing the right thing, you're not being excluded from the kingdom of God. And I think that also implies that if something bad is happening to us, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing the wrong thing. And I think that's something that our culture can sometimes tell us is, oh, if bad things are happening to you, you must be doing the wrong thing. And I think Jesus is telling us that that's not necessarily true. It's something to be aware of. So, how we're relating this to music today, we're going to look at a wide variety of music from different places and different times that's created in the context of persecution, in response to it, to help those who are suffering, or even in opposition to that persecution. I'm not making a judgment here about whether these people are being persecuted for the sake of righteousness, like the verse says, but I think it's really important music that we take a look at and consider how people have used music to minister to themselves and to speak out against persecution and oppression in their lives. So here we go. First, we'll look at the Psalms written by David. And in some of the Psalms, David is talking about how he's being persecuted and calling out for God to help him. For example, we have Psalm 7. O Lord my God, I come to you for protection. Rescue me and save me from all who pursue me. Or Psalm 69. It is for your sake that I have been insulted and that I'm covered with shame. Don't hide yourself from your servant. I am in great trouble. Answer me now. And these Psalms of David would have been songs that he wrote and sung, or that other people sang as well. And since that time, in Christian history, have been sung daily by Christians around the world. Or how about, for example, the protest songs of the 1950s and 1960s in America, and even the protest songs written after that time period. I want to talk about Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan, who was a founding member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 1960s, and got together groups of singers who could unify the movement behind song. And then in the 1970s, she formed Sweet Honey on the Rock, which was a female a cappella group to, again, continue singing about injustice, because the civil rights movement of the 1960s, as we know, did not fix racial problems in America. So the song I want to reference for you is from 1978, and the words feel painfully relevant to the world we live in today. Let me give you those words here. The refrain is, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons." And maybe you've heard of Mabubu, or maybe you've heard that style of singing and didn't know what it was. Maybe you've seen The Lion King. Well, there's this vocal style in that piece of theater, in the movie, that comes out of South Africa. This is specifically from the Natal region in South Africa. And what was happening in the 1920s and 30s was there was a lot of industrialization going on in this area, and Zulu men from surrounding villages and areas were traveling into the city to look for work in industry and in the mines. These young men were discriminated against under apartheid, and they formed their own sense of community in the parts of town that they were allowed to live in. And they didn't want to give up their cultural traditions. They wanted to hang on to the things that were important to them. And so after working all week, they would get together on the weekends, and they would sing together. And this specific style of a cappella singing that they called Mabubu, which means lion in Zulu, that style of singing emerged. An early famous example of this is Solomon Linda and the Evening Birds. And if you've heard the song "The Lion Sleeps Tonight," also known as Weemaway, then you've heard this style of singing, or at least the Western interpretation of one of those pieces. Maybe you've also heard of Ladysmith Black Mambazo, which also comes out of this tradition from the 1920s and 30s in South Africa. But again, this is a music that comes out of apartheid. It comes out of a group of people being forced to live in a specific area, but those people needing and wanting to support each other and have a sense of community and have their own cultural identity. Next, let's talk about Arvo Pert. He was a composer in Estonia, and he was writing in a really modernistic, sometimes atonal, 12-tone, modern way in the 1960s, which did not please the Soviet Union very much. He switched his style and started writing in a more minimalistic way, but then he wrote a piece called Credo. And if you're familiar in the Christian tradition, a creed is a statement of faith or a statement of belief. And so in the midst of Soviet rule, he's writing this piece expressing his own Russian Orthodox beliefs. And the only reason that it got by the censors in the first place and was not censored immediately was that he kind of skipped the step where you have the censors, the composers, look it over and approve it first, and he got it performed first. So then afterward, it was censored. He went into a sort of self-imposed 8-year retirement or exile where he wasn't writing, and then he emerged with a new style called tintinnabule, which has become his signature style. But because of his beliefs and the place he lived, he couldn't express those beliefs, wasn't allowed to express those beliefs through his music like he had tried to with Credo. And so he eventually left Estonia to live in other parts of the world to continue writing his music. Interesting thing about Arvo Pert is he's one of the most performed living composers, which means that of all the composers who are alive today, his music gets performed more than almost anyone else. I think he's being beat out by maybe John Williams. Maybe you've heard of Star Wars. Anyway, but he's a very important composer in the 20th and 21st century. So we've seen some different musical responses to persecution. Let's talk about reggae next, which is more of an active, empowering musical response to persecution. Ras Tafari was crowned the Emperor of Ethiopia in 1930, and it spawned the Rastafarian movement and religion in Jamaica at that time, and reggae became the soundtrack for that movement. In the minds of the Rastafarians, this crowning of the Lion of Judah in Ethiopia was a sign that white oppression was going to end and black people were going to be set free. Peter Tosh was one of the early pioneers of this reggae movement. The music involves Afro-Jamaican drumming, combines it with mento music, also influenced to some degree by jazz from America, and even rhythm and blues. Combines it in a totally unique way though. And the music, the lyrics that go with this music are all about empowerment and standing up. And the musical example we have here is get up, stand up for your rights. Don't take that persecution, stand up and make things right. And then lastly, we'll talk about music of the Holocaust. Clearly this is music made during a time of incredible oppression and suffering. And there's lots of different kinds of music that were made during this time in different contexts. Some of it music from the ghettos, some of it music literally in concentration camps, some of it music that Jews were singing and that had subtle, not so subtle for them, but subtle subversive elements that were speaking out against their oppressors, but in their oppressors' hearing. So Nazis might hear what they were singing about and not understand that their songs were actually talking about them and how unfairly they were being treated. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum online talks about the music of the Holocaust this way. For many victims of Nazi brutality, music was an important means of preserving and asserting their humanity. Such music, particularly the topical songs, also serves as a form of historical documentation. Like audio snapshots, these works offer a telling glimpse into the events and emotions that their creators and original audiences experienced firsthand. So you can see there are many different musical responses that human beings give to persecution in their lives. Think over this list of examples we just talked about and pick the one that most interested you and give it a close listen. And you can think about two things as you listen. One, you can think through those elements of music, thrimps, like we've been talking about. And this is where the beauty is in the music itself, in the sounds themselves. So listen through and take some notes for each one of those elements, timbre, harmony, rhythm, etc., and see what you noticed musically that's going on. And then the second thing to do is try and think about the context and the text of these pieces. What gives the music meaning? You know some of the context now, so look for the meaning in the music. And then I'll leave you with some queries that you can think about as you listen and after you've done your listening for this. First, does the music enable you to empathize with their experience of persecution and suffering? Does it help you understand their story better than you would otherwise? Is the music a good vehicle for that? Does it help you? And the second is, do you know of other music that comes out of a time or a place or an experience of persecution? Okay, difficult things to talk about and think about, but really important things too. And I hope one of your takeaways here is that music is so important to our experience as human beings because it not only helps us celebrate wonderful things in life, but it helps us deal with life when it's not going so well.